Grammar. A scholar who was a noted grammarian went to see a Sufi teacher. He was surprised to find that the Sufi did not lecture, cajole, or advance carefully constructed proofs for what he was doing. When he had the opportunity, he asked the Sufi, "Why do you not teach in a coherent manner? You must know the simple beginnings of your law as well as the more abstruse aspects. We scholars at least take note of the ignorance of beginners and lead them by degrees from simple things into advanced knowledge." The Sufi said, "I can illustrate this to you only if you will undertake a short course of instruction and ask no questions." The Sufi was a man of such repute that it was believed that he could work miracles. Because the scholar was hungry for knowledge, he agreed. The Sufi said, "You are a grammarian. Very well. Every day you shall collect the local cats and dogs and lecture them on the very earliest and most simple aspects of grammar." Thinking that this was a test or that it would lead to a miracle, the scholar obeyed. After several months, the Sufi called the scholar to him and said, "Have the cats and dogs learnt any grammar?" "No," said the grammarian, "none at all." "Why do you suppose that this is the case?" "Because they cannot speak or understand speech. They have to learn that first, if it is possible." "That is the answer to your original question," said the Sufi master. An old fool is worse than a young one, for the young may always grow wise. Zohair. Coincidence. The sage said, "Fate continues, but on no account abandon your own intentions. For if your plans accord with the supreme will, you will attain a plenitude of fulfillment for your heart." Anwar-e Suhaili. Dissatisfied. A Sufi once met a dissatisfied monk leaving the place of audience of Maulana Bahuddin Naqshband. The monk said, "Shun that man, for he will only occupy himself with trivia. I have travelled from China to drink his wisdom, and he offers me a children's tale." When the Sufi entered the presence of the teacher, the Maulana said, as if reading his mind, "There are 1,000 books of classics, all written to illustrate a dozen truths. There are a dozen tales which contain within them all those truths. If it were not for the demand of many for the appearance of quantity rather than relevance, the first letter of the first word of a single children's story could suffice to instruct man. It is because the learner is of such poor quality that the teacher has to repeat, enlarge and make bulky things which the student would not otherwise be able to see at all. When sense has left a head, it should be called a tail. Rumi. Conviction. Talal Nazaf was received with great honour at the court of Cordoba. His reputation had been known there for many years. Courtiers and emirs vied with one another to speak well of him. A certain scholar, however, asked him this question: "I have read your books and wonder why so much in them is directed towards the stupid and so little towards the wise." Talal said, "Most of it is directed towards such as you." That evening he was taking a meal at the house of the Grand Qadi, or judge, who remarked with delicacy, "A certain robustness of speech here in Cordoba might cause those who are well disposed and yet sensitive to change their attitude towards a newcomer." The Sufi said, "Those who have observed that such sensitivity, acted upon by forthrightness, produces hostility, have learnt that such a change is merely a change of opinion. I am here to demonstrate that a change of opinion is, in itself, not a change of understanding. Opinion is built upon sand. Knowledge is built upon rock. if a man is only convinced that I am good, he may be as stupid as one who is only convinced that I am bad. Conviction, far from being based upon reason, is the enemy of reason, because rationality does not change, while convictions do all the time. The Light Taker. A certain dervish was called Nurgir, Light Taker, because he had a clay pot which took in light from the day, even from a candle, and gave it out when he wanted it to. He was asked by a scholar, "We do not deny the remarkable characteristics of your light-trapping pot, but we do question your rumoured capacity to see into the hearts of men. If you can indeed perceive people's characters and potentialities, how is it that someone has just sold you a melon which proved to be tasteless?" Nurgir said, "Would you care to come with me and undertake an experiment?" This scholar refused, and spread the word that Nurgir was a charlatan. But after many months of this defamation, they both found themselves at the court of the king of the time, and the king showed interest in the dispute. The king said, "It has been conveyed to my ears that this scholar has challenged this dervish, but that he will not allow the dervish to demonstrate his capacities. Such an attitude is a menace to good order and a threat to the general tranquillity of men. The scholar will stand condemned as a jackal, so pronounced by me, unless he agrees to stop talking about facts and allows himself to be exposed to realities. I cannot think that he will reveal himself to be the word drudge that people must conclude him to be, if he were to rely upon uninformed opinion for his proofs, to resort to spleen and personal calumny, or to do any of the other things which mark the pretended as distinct from the real scholar." The dervish and scholar said, "We hear and obey." The dervish took the scholar to the top of a mountain and made him stay with him for 3 days, listening to dervish law. Then he brought him down to a defile in the mountains where a crowd of witnesses were waiting, headed by the king. People were toiling up the track on horses and mules, with donkeys and on foot, and as they approached, the dervish said, "Look, king and scholar, I shall place my hand on the shoulder of this scholar, lending him some of my perceptiveness. As each person nears yonder bend, he will become aware of their inner thoughts. His awareness will answer his questions as to why a dervish does not use his powers all the time." Sure enough, as person after person passed the appointed spot, the scholar's face became more and more haggard, as he called out, "Oh, that man is loathsome! Ugh!" Or, "Do not do what you intend to do, O man, for it will lead to your destruction." And again such things as, "That man who looks evil is to be the means of rescuing large numbers of mankind." His words were so confused that people thought that he must have gone mad. His face became lined as if with great age, and his beard was white when it had been black before. After an hour or so, the scholar wrenched himself free from the dervish's hand, and threw himself at the feet of the king. He said, "Your Majesty, I cannot endure this knowledge 1 second longer. I have seen people who looked like saints, and have perceived that they were posers. Worse, I have seen people who thought that they were good, and their evil consisted in their thinking that they were on some good path. I have seen and felt things which no man should be expected to experience." The king said, "What wisdom have you gained from this event?" The scholar replied, "I now understand that if anyone were to remain perceptive to the real condition of men all the time, he would go mad." The dervish told him, "Now you know that the dervish law includes the knowledge of when to be awake and when to remain asleep." Tomorrow. Shame on you like toddlers the night before a party. How long will you be one who waits for tomorrow? Proverb. Stupefying. Fair as a bride is the world, but beware, for none may marry this stupefying one. Idries Shah. Interpretation. A certain dervish teacher used to spend 6 days of each week in meditation. On the 7th, he would journey to the town nearest his zavia and walk from one shop to another, drinking tea and holding impromptu conversations. On one of these occasions, a stranger saw him tasting honey cakes in company with a certain scholar. The stranger, whose knowledge of Sufism was limited to popular conceptions of the devoutness of dervishes, exclaimed aloud in the marketplace, "Shame upon the dervish who consorts with mere pedants! When a man has the choice of significant inner reflection and yet pursues childish things, he is surely far from attainment." Among those who heard him were some who were better informed as to the teacher's repute, but not his mode of action. They said, "This man of knowledge is, no doubt, sharing his wisdom with mere ordinary folk, for have Sufis not always proclaimed that academics are at all times profoundly in need of converse with men of real experience?" This thought shamed the critic. He imagined that he had learned something through what was really a shallow rebuke based upon generalizations. That night, however, a subtle visitant appeared to him and said, "Because you have felt real regret, you may have a real interpretation as to the case which had perplexed you. Know, therefore, that dervishes act upon others in a manner often unsuspected by those who benefit, and unimagined by observers. The inner effect upon the scholar due to his companionship with the dervish is 1,000 times greater if the dervish does not dispute with him. It is powerful even if the dervish does not speak of any matter of supposed consequence at all. An enlightened dervish who is silent, or even talking about flies and ants, is having a far greater effect upon the world than a scholar talking about theories and speculations, or a sentimentalist who thinks he has deep feelings. 5 kinds of folly. The sages have said that 5 things are signs of foolishness. First, seeking one's own good while harming others. Second, looking for the yield of the last days without discipline and service. Third, loving women harshly and brashly. Fourth, seeking to learn the refinements of science in comfort and ease. Fifth, expecting friendship without oneself being reliable and trustworthy. Idries Shah. Yusuf Son of Hayula. Soldiers, accompanied by a pedagogue, came to Yusuf one night and said, "The works of Ibn al-Arabi have been consigned to the flames this day throughout Andalusia. You have the repute of studying the Eastern wisdom, Sufism. We shall have to take you for trial." "What is your warrant?" asked Yusuf. "Our warrant is that of the Faqih Ibrahim, the jurist scholar who stands beside you." Yusuf said, "Guilt by association is not admitted by the law of God or man. I study the Eastern wisdom, but you cannot say that I practice it." Ibrahim said, "You have written 3 treatises on it, which are studied by young people who are indifferent to more authoritative commands." Yusuf said, "The law permits anyone to study and to quote, and it does not insist that a student is a practitioner by definition." Ibrahim said, "Do you deny that you practice Sufism?" Yusuf said, "I deny that if you bring me to trial you will be able to escape without looking a fool. When Aristotle wrote on minerals, people did not accuse him of being a mineral, and if we have come to such a state, it is time that we returned to an earlier one." "They could not question minerals," said Ibrahim. "They did not know the method." You must be insane. And if I am, the law will protect me, for it is forbidden to persecute the mad. The mad are under the protection of God, for they have no other natural protector, and the state must protect those who are under the protection of God. Tasks. Why do you let others do what should be your task? And why, after such idleness, do you belittle others' work? Anwar Isuhaili. Impressions. Time brought 1,000 impressions. Not one of them had I seen in the mirror of the imagination. Anwar Isuhaili.